Thank you so much for having me today. Absolute pleasure. By way of context, I work with a number of Fortune 500 companies, helping them understand emerging technology and lifestyle trends and figuring out the so what for their business and doing that cross industry. Today, given the focus of this conference is fintech and financing, I wanted to share a trend that's really truly global in nature. And that would be helpful to have many of our Canadian innovators and those dialing in from elsewhere to tune into. This does present a new market for products and services that could potentially be launched by the fintech community and would certainly find a very willing and growing consumer base that ends up being quite financially lucrative. And that cohort is a new term being dubbed the flexible class. We'll get into that in a moment. I'll walk you through some of the numbers. We'll walk you through how this is going to affect the future of work, as well as the future of leisure, and we'll leave you with a couple of calls to action. I know we have some time for Q&A, so I definitely look forward to a rich, engaging dialogue. So in terms of a lot of the dialogue happening right now when it comes to the future of work centers on this debate of, do we continue to allow work from home, or do we encourage or dictate in certain terms for employees to come back into the office? Despite the fact that through the course of the pandemic, we have seen that at least for certain occupations, the work could be done fairly effectively, if not even more effectively at home. Although that discourse, in my humble opinion, is actually missing a much bigger nuance. And the debate is less around, do I work from the office or do I work from my home? And it's more a question of, if the world is your oyster, and if the amount of connectivity that's required really boils down to your Wi-Fi, your microphone setup, your webcam, your phone, your notebook, your computer, and your brain, could you be doing your work just as effectively from your home base, let's say in Vancouver, or could you be doing that work while sitting in Miami or in Paris and eating croissants and taking yourself out for a stroll earlier in the morning? And that's really at the core of a lot of the discussion that I wanted to have with this group today. You might be familiar with the term digital nomad, which is a portion of this trend, but not the entirety. But that certainly is a large premise for today's discussion. The future workforce is going to look different. The supporting technologies, the supporting businesses that are going to be required also present a mass opportunity. And in an interesting way, what's old is kind of new again. So you'll notice on the middle of the slide, the image of our past history as humankind, where we were nomadic to a certain extent, constantly in search of the best climate for crops, best climate for the food that we're following, and then over time, the socioeconomic considerations. And we are at the cusp of a major migration. Just over the weekend, I was catching up on my Economist reading, and there was a quote in there around the new wave of globalization of people, especially white collar workers, that's happening at the same time that we are seeing the nationalization of many manufacturing facilities and such that are coming back onshore for various national security type interests. So the definition of this new flexible class, it's really at the intersection of both the digital nomad and the global citizen movement that is changing the way that people think about their lives holistically, not just their work. This is a new class of individuals that's embedding geographic and professional flexibility into their lifestyles. And this comes on the heel of the pandemic, the mass layoffs that we've seen across the tech sector as well as beyond. And so this group is reevaluating their core values, and they're seeking the tools and services that address their needs and supporting their ideal type of lifestyle. So in this talk, we'll be exploring some of the motivators of this class of individuals and the opportunities that are presented for the fintech industry. Now, I'm seeing my video is pause on the screen. Let me see if this is on my end or on your end as well. Oh, and it looks like the video. Okay, so let's hope that Perfect. So the flexible class encompasses several components of work, the choice of location, the questions around how does one continue to build and nurture a social network that is global in nature, and this rising question of time. There's this notion of the philosophy of leisure that at one point in history, the mark of wealth and aristocracy was the ability to choose how one spent their time and to opt to do nothing at all. However, as a result of the Industrial Revolution, we have seen that completely pivot, where now, we all know that the marker of success is often seen by how busy are you, and of course that's contributing to burnout culture and the rest. So this cohort of incredibly global minded individual that is choosing to spend potentially their winters in a warmer location, their summers between 2 or 3 destinations, while the lifestyle is designed in a way that supports their unique objectives. All of the supporting enabling services still leave room for growth. Some of the areas that we've heard through the research done of late include pain points in the world of healthcare. So imagine the consumer that is figuring out how they continue to live a healthy lifestyle as they're actively bouncing around the world and having the ability to plug into their various gyms, their various meal kit type services. There are enabler questions around the world of insurance and insurtech, given that most insurance policies are capped out if you're leaving one particular country for more than 30 days at a time. There are questions around education for those who find themselves with school-aged children and are looking at options to support the homeschooling agenda with the addition of technology. And of course, given this is a FinTech conference, we couldn't ignore all of the questions that relate to financial management, whether it be the day-to-day finances as you're in multiple countries in any given year, or the longer-term financial planning considerations, including the build-out of a real estate investment portfolio. Those are just some of the enablers at hand. In terms of income, when you close your eyes and you think about the term digital nomad, and this has been fun to test out with various audiences, the image that often comes to mind is of a worker in their early 20s sitting on a beachside terrace, potentially in Bali, in a hammock, working from their computer and doing some freelance graphics editing or freelance copywriting work. And in fact, when you look at the statistics from 2020, 36% of folks who identified as nomads reported earning an income over $75,000. Meanwhile, a surprising 25% earned less than $25,000, which could also explain why this cohort is looking at affordability as one of the drivers of where they're choosing to spend time. But just 3 short years later, the folks that are identifying with the digital nomad cohort, 36% of them now have an income that is over $100,000 USD per year. And so we're seeing the rise of individuals who tend to be higher in their career ladder. They have a lot more flexibility over where and how they opt to do their work, opting to lean in and design these more customized lives. The reason I include some of these statistics is for those of you in the audience who are thinking through your current businesses, your current business trajectories. This is certainly a demographic that is worth considering paying attention to. And the world of technology has certainly made our lives a lot easier to make this decision of where to work and where to play from anywhere around the world. And that includes a lot of the advancements in metaverse and immersive technologies. Many are asking the question of, wait, is metaverse dead? Given some of the announcements we've seen around layoffs or restructurings in various metaverse type departments. But the reality is that no, the metaverse domain is absolutely here to stay. And the lines between the physical world and the digital world will continue to blur. Here on the screen, you will see a video that's playing in slow motion of a car manufacturing facility. This team is doing a final design review, and they're able to do this with a blend of headsets and in-person and fully digital experiences. And when you ask the folks who've been in these sorts of rooms, they say that after a while, they lose the ability to pay attention to what's real, what's happening in the virtual space. And they've been able to reduce this design review process from taking several weeks to taking several days, which is quite substantial and further supports this thesis that with metaverse, we are going to see streamlined employee onboarding, training, and experience, and we are going to see significant efficiencies throughout multiple sectors also, and will enable multiple folks to say, wait a second, why am I limited to living and working within the 30-mile radius of where I was potentially born? And we know that that's where the majority of folks typically end up. So in this context of having a global workforce that is perpetually moving, chasing the season or chasing opportunities with their friend circles, the conference circuit, or other motivations at heart, what does the future of money look like? What does the future of finance entail? And some of the provocative questions that I wouldn't say necessarily have been fully sorted out, but there are bits and pieces that are being tackled, are considerations such as how might we support multi-currency banking and credit products, especially as we see the rise of the freelance economy continuing, as we see more solo entrepreneurs likely using tools such as ChatGPT to launch products and services. We are also going to see it. We can suppose more individuals having payroll from multiple companies that may be registered in various jurisdictions. So certainly, as you look at the Web3 movement and the adoption of cryptocurrency, we are going to see the additional adoption of those technologies by this type of cohort. Questions that remain to be seen how they will be addressed include things such as credit scores and the fact that they typically don't follow you as you shift geographical locations, and the ability to manage multiple tax obligations. We have seen countries literally rolling out the red carpet, trying to attract this up-and-coming demographic to their countries, knowing that if they can hook them for a 6-month or a 12-year nomad visa, as is the case in places like Barbados or in Portugal, that they are expecting a corresponding uplift to the economic spend of that demographic within their country borders. And given that many countries are charging for their nomad visas anywhere in the range of $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 plus, there is an economic upside. So this question of taxation, once it becomes more and more common for folks to not just have their single tax home base, but to be having this global footprint, we will see more opportunities arising in that domain. And the final question that I will leave you with that is certainly top of mind for this flexible class demographic is around what is the definition of home? Is home where you live? Is home where you own real estate that perhaps you're renting out? Or does home become a fractional ownership model where you have 3 or 4 pieces of property around the world that potentially you're staying in a portion of the year, and the rest of the time you're simply benefiting from the rental income yields? And we're starting to see some fintech companies that are dabbling in that area. A Canadian startup that's notable is the Villa Life, and they are doing fractionalized luxury real estate rentals and platforms like Kindred that are member-only community home swapping tools as alternatives to Airbnb. And based on the financial projections, we are going to see the rise of more of those types of fintechs as the real estate ownership landscape becomes more fluid, further requiring more flexible lending and financing products as well. So that's a general overview of the flexible class as the new cohort and demographic that we are seeing emerging as a result of the rise of globalization and the trends that allow for more and more remote work. I'd love to pause there and take any questions from the group. If you happen to be working in an area or building a product that targets this demographic, I really do encourage you to reach out to me. Twitter is probably the best way. Come and say hello. We are building a repository of folks that are in agreement with this thesis and hypothesis. Team, I'll pass it over to you for Q&A.
Yeah, so just to rehash that question, it's around, from a fractional fintech perspective, where do you see some of the opportunities happening, evolving based on your early research around the flexible?
Well, one of the statistics we are starting to monitor is rates of home ownership in Canada, as well as in some of the other high-cost markets. And we've seen a significant reduction in levels of home ownership if we compare 2011 to 2022 statistics. And the biggest drop in home ownership levels, unsurprisingly, is in the cohort of folks that's under the age of 35. And so what we're seeing in turn are companies that are rolling out products that are specifically targeting that demographic and saying, listen, you might find yourself priced out of purchasing in Toronto or in Vancouver, but you could, with the same amount of your saved down payment, in a portion of a home that's either in Canada, or increasingly what we are going to see are investment opportunities that are facilitated in international markets. As an example, a few months ago, I was having dinner with a friend who happens to have close ties throughout Africa and other emerging markets. And he was telling me about some real estate investments he was making. And when I asked about the cost of some of this pre-construction world, I nearly fell off my chair when he said that he was investing in some of these plots of land for as low as, get this, $1,000 per plot, with a reputable developer in an up-and-coming geography, to which the prompting question is, wait, really? How do we make those sorts of opportunities accessible to a broader cohort of people who might say, here is a $20,000 check, let's go pick up a couple of these plots of land as we aim to build a more diversified real estate portfolio that also supports the travel that this cohort is already doing for both personal and professional reasons. So oftentimes we think that we're competing just within the Canadian market, and the debate is, do you own or do you buy? But that misses that there's now this third set of opportunities arising, which is, wait a second, the world is our oyster. How do we start to build a real estate portfolio that builds that in a more streamlined way?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I love this. I traveled to PEI with my family. We drove out there and we were seeing $40,000 plots and that were enormous right on the water. And I was talking to a couple of the locals, and they did, because it's an island, it's the scarcity thing. These plots have come up in value. They used to be 20K and now they're 40. So they only anticipate. So at that sort of investment level, whether you need to fractionalize that or not, it's just an example where we can unearth opportunities. That was just the land. It was just a plot. And I'm sure it comes with a lot of hair when you purchase that type of plot. But, if you build and having a look at the different services that you plug in, but I think it's super exciting. So anyway, I want to thank you, Iliana, for your talk on Flex Class. I'm consider myself a global citizen for myself. So, and I think you do too, to some degree. So that's awesome. So thanks so much. If anyone has any questions or any follow-up, I'll be certain to get them out here to you. And we will be tracking this flexible gig economy, creative economy. I like the flexible class. It's sort of the best term I've heard it described as you did today, but I think it's all part of the same movement. And we're at a point where there's opportunities, including fintech opportunities. Thank you very much.